All right, everybody, we are ready to start. Thank you for coming. Sorry, this week was a very busy week, so I forgot to remind people about the class. I apologize. But good, we got the MVPs here, so thank God, Baruch Hashem. We are all good. I'm going to share the screen now just to finish our topic on dishwasher, and hopefully we'll close with a very impactful, halakha l'ma'aseh, which is very good. So right now we left off. Let's just do a quick summary. We saw that the Sefer HaTirumah was very strict on making sure that you did not use any kelim that were ben yomah, that were used within 24 hours. If you had to, you need to make sure that everything was scraped. At least one of them else wasn't ben yomah, and if they are both ben yomah, hakol asur. So again, for our cases, when it talks about dishwasher, that's what we're really asking. We're and sink to rinse things in the same sink. That's what we're asking. We're asking about being able to use the same basin for things that you're using right now. All right, I had meat in the dairy in the morning, and I had meat in the afternoon or night, and now I want to wash them together at the end of the day. Sefer HaTirumah was strict. The Ramban was holek and said no. It's exactly like Nat Bar Nat, and therefore it's not a problem. So the fact that we have Ramban as a Rishon in our camp is really great. The Rosh also was lenient. He allowed even both of them were ben yomam, but he said everything has to make sure that there is no fat whatsoever. So meaning this bottom line, what we were learning from the Ramban and the Rosh is you got to really scrape those dishes well. If a person scrapes the dishes, it's going to be much easier to be matir. And then we saw the Bedek Abayit that said that about marak. It is not. It's not. The soup or the liquid is not a problem, but shuman is a problem. Mamashut basar, the marak is not, and therefore that allowed us to get a better understanding. So now we're up to source 6. We're up to Maran. Just before we started, anybody who was here or not here last week, I see some of the regulars, but that maybe missed last week. Is anything not clear, or did anybody want me to go over something? Okay, good. So now we're on source 6. Ready? So here we go. We're in Maran. Excuse me. Now Maran. Maran in Yoreh De'ah Siman Sadi Hes, Eve Gima. Ke'arot, so this is Shulchan Aruch. Now let's see what Maran brings down as halacha l'ma'aseh. Ke'arot shel basar, dishes of meat dishes, shehudhu biyurach ulevet, that are washed in a dairy basin or a dairy vessel, behamin, with hot water. Shehayad soledet bahen, the hand is nichvet, meaning it pulls away from. Afilu shnehem b'nei yoman, even if both of them are used within 24 hours, mutar. It is allowed. It is allowed to wash these dishes together. Pshat Maran Shulchan Aruch, Siman 95 in Yoreh De'ah, Seif 3. So always come armed with your sources, because there's a lot of people that don't know what they're talking about when it comes to Kosher Kitchen, and you gotta educate them. Listen, I said that wrong. Not that you should educate them, meaning again, always b'shalom, but really the key is that you have to make sure that you are confident in what you're doing. Now let's see what else. Why is it mutar? This is exactly like the Ramban. When we scroll up just for 1 second in source number 2, when the Ramban was cholek on the Sefer HaTirumah, he says, how is this different from the case of dagim she'alu b'ke'ara? If you remember just 1 more second, what is dagim she'alu b'ke'ara? That is the benchmark example of nat bar nat, noten tam bar noten tam. I have fish, I cook them in a meat pot. Now I want to take the fish out of the meat pot, put cheese on it. So it's the same exact thing. I have meat dishes. The meat went into the dishes. Now the meat taste is coming out of the dish to affect something, but it's mixing with the water, or it's mixing with something else that could be mutar. So it's dagim she'alu b'ke'ara. So it's not a problem. So Maran sees it as such. That is noten tam bar noten tam dehetera. That is mutar. Now he has the caveat. He says vehu shiomad. This is all again. Maran only says this. as long as the person who's cooking can say barili, if you remember what barili, bari meaning it's healthy, it's strong in my mind, shelo haya shum shuman davuk bahen, that there's not 1 ounce of fat that was stuck to the plate. So meaning you have to scrape them off well, and you have to make sure that there were no chunks of anything. You scrape those off, and then it's going to be allowed. Once you do that, then it's going to be mutar, even if they're both ben yomam. But what happens if there were chunks that are on them? What is the second exchange here? So we're learning 2 things from Pshat Maran. First of all, the second exchange is water is the agent that's allowing these things to happen. So if I have meat dishes, I have meat that goes into the, I ate a steak. I ate a steak on my meat dish. So the meat goes into the steak, the meat from the steak goes into the dish. That's exchange number 1. Then what's exchange number 2? Exchange number 2 is the meat taste that's locked into my dish goes into the water. That's exchange number 2. There's nothing wrong with meat flavored water. So therefore, it's not a problem. It's noten tam, bar noten tam. But if you have shuman, fat that is dabuk, that's going to be a problem. Now you're going to need 60 times the water against whatever this chunk was in order to be mevatel. Excuse me. That's on the piyakara. So you're going to need that. So again, bottom line is once we start getting into mamashut, it's considered a very big, very, very, very big hassle. Very big hassle. And once we do that, we're already going into fire, even according to Maran. Now I have to worry about 60 times. So practically, even though, halachically speaking, even if there were chunks on the dish, then according to Maran, there would still be a way to salvage it. Make sure that you're just washing the dishes with a ton of water. But how am I going to know? Based on the chunks, based on how much water I'm using, it's not so practical. So again, we want to make sure that even according to Maran, what are we doing? We are taking off the chunks. Let's get with some questions now. Let's see. Anybody with any questions on Pshat Maran? Nobody? We're all good? Okay. So let's continue. So let's see. Now we're going to see the Ashkenazim. The Ashkenazim, right, Rama, is much more strict about using, about this, about washing the meat dishes and the dairy. Let's see. The Rama in source 7. Rama in source 7 says, Yesh osrim afilu en shuman davuk bahen. There are those who forbid it, even if there's no fat that's stuck to it, fat or meat stuck to the plates. Elaim ken ehad min hakelim enam bnei yoman. The only way to get around it is one of the 2 things that you're rinsing in has to be used within past 24 hours. It's not allowed that both of them were used within 24 hours, because again, we said then it's ta'am lishvah, and then that ta'am, it's good taste. We don't want that mixing even in the water. From a kli rishon. Ve'az kol hakelim mutarim. And then in that case, everything would be mutar. So even anyone who's mahmir, as long as you waited 24 hours to wash the dish, then it would be mutar. But not too many people do that. But the water actually is forbidden water. If both of them are bnei yoman, and it's so strict, meaning because if you're taking this stance and you actually rinsed 2 dishes together that were bnei yoman, that were used within 24 hours, one for meat and one for dairy, everything is asur. Hakol asur. Everything, the dishes, the water, it's all asur. Now on this, the Rama says, "V'davka shehudhu beyahad ubekli rishon." If you're rinsing them together, not one after the other, in a kli rishon. So even somebody who wants to be strict, by the way, what are you seeing from this Rama? You can wash the meat dishes first, and then the dairy dishes, one after the other. or bekli sheni afilu biyahad, or in a kli sheni together. Now, what's a kli sheni? Hakol share. A kli sheni, unless the water is really boiling hot in the sink, you could also say that a sink is a kli sheni. It's not a kli. It's not a vessel that's on the fire. Or if you take an outside pot that's not on the fire, that was not used to cook, that's also mutar. So even though the Rama is more strict, we're seeing a lot of leniency. If you get creative, let's say you're Ashkenaz, and let's say we say, look, I don't view it as the Ramban or as Maran, and I want to be strict. So now there's a lot of creativity that you could do one rinse after the other. You could make sure that you're doing it only in the sink and not the dishwasher where the hot water is. You're not heating up the water, and especially what do we see from the first point of Rama? Yad soledet bo. Yad soledet bo means the water is so hot that you can't put your hand in it. If you touch it, you pull your hand away. You pull your hand back. So if you're washing your hands in the sink, if you're washing your dishes in the sink, it's definitely not too hot for your hands to touch it because that's what you're using. You're using your hands. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. Ve'im ira mikeli rishon shel basar al keli halav. Let's say this happens, by the way. Let's say you're inside the sink. There's a dairy dish, and you have a meat dish in your hand, and you pour out from that dish onto a dairy dish. Dineh kekli rishon ve'osed im haya ben yomo. It's going to be asur, so you have to be careful not to pour boiling hot meat from a kli rishon onto a kli that's halavi, meaning we would agree with that too, with the Sfaradim. ואם יראה מים רותחים שאינם של בשר ולא של חלב על הכלים של בשר ושל חלב ביחד ואפילו שומן דבוק בהם, הכל שרה, ואין עירוי ככלי ראשון, ממש יעשה שהכלים שמערה עליהם יבעלו זה מזה. Not only that, the Rama says if you're in a sink, right, this is where we do, and you're pouring boiling water on top of the kelim, irui is not like a kli rishon, and hakol shada, everything is allowed. So hot sink water is going to be allowed according to everybody because you're pouring it out of the faucet. Once it's in the air, it's not in a kli rishon, it's irui. The dishwasher is more strict, however, because the water is actually cooking inside that dishwasher and it's dispensing it. That's how I view it. You know what I'm saying? That meaning when Rama was talking about here, this is really heterim and talking about, when it's talking about pouring from one thing to the next, it's really talking about the sink because hot water is coming out of it, but not necessarily the dishwasher. The dishwasher, up until this point, until we get to the end of this class, we're going to see that would presumably be a little bit strict. Okay, questions? No? We're all good?
Rabbi, what about soap involved with any of this?
Sorry that you're a little muffled. I can't really hear you.
Soap? Have you used dishwashing soap on anything yet?
Can anybody hear her or not really? Can you?
No.
You can hear her? Say it one more time, Odette. Sorry.
Okay. Dishwashing soap. Could you use that?
Great. So you're saying if you said dishwasher soap, that's going to be the next source.
Okay. Liquid soap in the sink.
And liquid soap in the sink also, but I don't even need to get to liquid soap in the sink because really the water, the heat of the water is not really going to be a problem because it's coming the heat of the water is coming out of the faucet. It's going from a kli rishon to a kli sheni, so it's losing power.
Okay. Thanks.
It's losing the ability to cook.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering why I can't hear you so well.
Oh, I don't know. I'm in the same spot. Really? I'm on my iPad. Should I go to the phone?
No, it's me. My speakers were low. I just found out.
Okay.
Good. I got you now.
Fine. Thank you.
So wait, did I answer the question? Now that I could hear you better.
Yeah.
Did I
hear you. I heard you.
Okay, good.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Now, let's see. Any other questions? No. All right. Now let's go to this Maran. Now this is an interesting Maran because here Maran, he dedicates. This is the same siman that we're in. Yored Siman Sadihe. Seif Daled though. Law number 4. Now at the end of this seif, at the end of this siman, and here in this seif, what Maran does is he now gives his opinion And, we don't really see this in the Talmud anywhere. It's hinted to in certain places, but said this way, we don't really see it. But sort of like what Odette said, what about if I put something in the liquid, in the water, that's going to make the water putrid already? Meaning, we talked about the advantages to having negative taste. Negative taste is we're going to say allowed to be mixed. We don't mix it. Natlap, no tentam livgam is not lechatechila. But if we're not ingesting it and we're not trying, here we're just trying to wash the dishes. So if what we're doing is here, and now we're talking about tentam livgam, two exchanges, can there be a way with using some negative taste to circumvent it? So now let's look at this. We're on source 8. So this is Maran talking. He says, Yir'eh li, it seems to me, Maran, she'im natnu efer. Efer is a type of soap. It's a type of chemical. B'mayim hamin. And you place this chemical, this soap, in hot water. She'beyura. You put it in the yura, in the cauldron. Kodem shehiniho hakederot betocha. Before you actually wash the dishes. Then in that case, afa pisha shuman davuk ba'en mutar. Look out how far. Look at the power of the ephod. The power of this ephod is even if there are chunks, if you actually put soap in the water to kill the taste, even if there were chunks, everything's allowed. Why? Let's keep reading. The ayin yod is the al yedeh. The al yedeh ephod hu noten tam lifgam. And afterwards, because you put the soap inside, this is considered negative taste. So this is actually talking about, let's say I wanted to fill up a pot with water and now rinse a meat and dairy dish together. Let's be accurate with the case. Maran is saying, heat up the water, meaning even in that basin that you're using, that's a kli rishon. Pour soap into the water, and now you can put any two vessels in, even if they have chunks, which is crazy. But it's not crazy, what I'm saying. It's shocking. That even that, according to Maran, is allowed. He's even bringing the chunks. So, based on this, we want to say that anytime if a person wants to, even in this, let's go over, this is really talking about the sink, if you think about it. And nowadays, nobody is really boiling water and then putting dishes in, unless we're talking about a dishwasher, which we'll get to in a second. But here, what we're really talking about is, let's say I fill up a dairy pot, my big dairy pot with hot water, if it was in a kli rishon, and now I want to wash my meat pot in it. So far, we were saying that Ramban and Maran said it's mutar. How is it mutar? Just make sure to get rid of the chunks. And even if you get rid of the chunks, you could use them. They could have both been used recently for dairy, and it's mutar. But again, just it pays to go back up to Pshat Maran. Let's go up. He says, however, it should be that you took away all of the fat and all of the chunks. That's what it should be. Okay? We're not going to worry about the second part. If there was chunks, then you have to worry about 60 times the water. We're not interested. Even according to the Ramah, who was strict, gave a lot of other ways how you could do it. Wash one dish at a time, one type of dishes at a time. Don't put them both together at the same time. We said also, instead of heating up the water in that dairy basin together, which would be more like dishwasher, pour the water that's hot on top of it. That's a sink. Doing that, it automatically tones down the cooking power of that water. And he says, let's just read that again. Par of water, that's the hot water from your sink. On top of kelim that are basar and halav together, even if there's chunks, everything's allowed. So to wash those dishes in your sink, it's going to totally be allowed. You can't put your hands in there if the water was that hot. That's another heter, because in the beginning we said that it has to be water that is yad soledet bo, and that's not necessarily what it is. Now another heter onto that, Maran says, and by the way, if you fill it up and you put soap in it, that's also going to be mutar. That's also going to be allowed. Now, before I take questions, it looks like you guys are not so talkative today. Let's go into, I'm holding this up to you. This is called, this sefer, this is the reprint of what we call Magen Ba'adi. Magen Ba'adi was written by one of our greatest chief rabbis of Halab and rabbi in our community, Hacham Batlu Babadi, wrote Magen Ba'adi, and in it, he has a very famous teshubah, Siman Yud Tet, about dishwasher, using one dishwasher. Our custom from Halab, our rabbi, our community, our gadol. If you ask many of the rabbis and the people from the older generations, he was probably our greatest rabbi that we had in terms of knowledge. And I'm reading to you from the end what he says now. Now again, I summarize for you. He brings all of the heterim that we said, and he brings down Maran, and he also brings down what he said, what Maran said about efer, about soap, and he talks about not barnat, and he talks about the Gemara on Pesachim, about Hag'ala. He talks about many different angles to get to it, but I think for our purposes, the bottom line is what's important. He says, Sof davar. Says you're allowed to use this dishwasher to wash all of your dishes. Even together, and they will use within 24 hours. So the dishwasher, again, why are we singling out dishwasher from sink? We're singling it out because you could have made the case that really it's a kli rishon. The dishwasher is a kli rishon, a primary vessel where the hot water is getting cooked inside of it with the dishes in it. And it fills up, and then it's constantly circulating it, and the water could even be hotter than Yad Soleh did pour because it's a machine. The water can get extra hot, hotter than what a sink water would be. We don't care. Even he says, even for the Ashkenazim, they don't need to be strict and have two dishwashers. Even the Ashkenazim could have one dishwasher. However, what's the key thing? Again, we want to say two things. Number one, again, it behooves us also. Again, he had the Magen Ba'adi as a go-to. His main thrust is to make sure that you're putting the soap in. Since you put soap in the dishwasher and those capsules, Cascade, whatever it is, you put that in, that's like efer, that's like Maran, Seif Daled. That's like Maran once you put the efer. Now, we could say, but if we do, when Maran said that about the efer, he was saying you could even put the efer with the chunks. You could even put the efer with the chunks. However, it's very easy nowadays to get rid of the chunks, and again, I would recommend that also because we saw somebody Shonim and even Maran. Once you're putting the chunks in, you're definitely playing with fire. It's a great habit to get into that before you use, if you have only one dishwasher or one sink. Again, we're using the efer, we're taking those heterim and running with it. We're taking Pshat Maran, we're taking the Ramban, and we have Magen Ba'adi on our side. But also, we want to make sure that we're doing it al chol hashitot. If you scrape off the chunks, that's the greatest way to do it, and really to be covered from all sides. Let's take any questions or thoughts. Let's go to Myrna.
Hi, Rabbi. So sorry, my sound cut out a little with the dishwasher. So bottom line, I can put meat and dairy dishes if they were rinsed off, scraped off, in the dishwasher at the same time.
Correct. As long as there's soap in the dishwasher, you have to run it with soap.
Right. Okay. And then I have another question about when we were talking about in the sink, meat and dairy at the same time. Does any of it matter if the dairy, let's say, was cold, like a cereal bowl? Like I use the bowl for just like cold milk and cereal. Like, then is this even an issue that it's in the sink as meat at the same time?
Well, like we said, we're even applying here to, let's say, the water being hot. So we're assuming that everything else is cold, and that's what it should be. Meaning if everything else is cold, now we're adding hot water to it. We don't want that milk and meat to mix together unless there's soap involved.
Got it.
Now,
Okay.
We do have the heter over here to say that, look, from the sink, it's hot water that's being poured out of it. And even though you're using quote-unquote hot water from the sink, it's not really a hot enough temperature that's called Yad Soleh that your hand is going to be jumping away from it. Right? Why? Because you need it to be warm enough or at least cool enough, really, for your hands to be able to be touching the dishes, correct?
Right.
So again, as long as you're using soap and you're using a sponge and you're using, again, the key thing to here is soap. Once we can use soap, then even washing the meat and the dairy dishes together in the sink, as we said, is mutar. It's even easier than our case because it's water that's irui. It's poured out from a kli rishon. It's
Okay.
getting the air from the sink.
Okay, you just made me think of another question. Sorry, I'm all over the place.
Good.
You mentioned sponges.
Yeah.
So different sponges for meat and dairy, or
We like to have
doesn't
different sponges
matter?
for meat and dairy only because it deals with the chunks. So if they're putting it in hot water and they have chunks, then you can. If you just have a parve sponge, let's say, and let's say you're going to remove the chunks, you have a lot to rely on, especially because the sponge is soaked with soap. You understand? It's the same thing. But I've seen people have meat and a dairy sponge. I think I have that. I forgot. I have to ask Rochelle. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think you have to lechatechila because we're in the soap and because you're not using water that's yad soleded. But definitely it's something that is nice to do again because we're really just trying to stay away from chunks. That's what we're trying.
All right, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Myrna. Okay, anybody else?
You have to scrape your dishes. That's what you have to do. It's the right way to do anyway. You don't want to clog your sink.
100%. See, from a clogging
I'm
stand.
telling you. No cereal bowls in the sink with Cheerios. You can throw them out and then you put it in the sink.
Sounds like you're the mother of boys, Odette, because
Exactly. Yes.
that's me. We just threw everything. Tortured my mom. Well,
Sure. I'm sure. She loves you.
I know, for sure. But yes, you're right. You got to scrape it out. Scrape it out and use soap. That's if you had to summarize it with those 2 points, and then you're good to go. Okay, great. Anybody else? Okay, that's it for this topic. And we'll hopefully start a new topic next week. I'll try to post both recordings. I got lazy this week on the chat. I will try to do so, and we're looking forward to May, our last few classes. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.